Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Damon Friedman Show. This isn't just a podcast. This is a movement. And movements are always started by leaders that are passionate about a cause. They organize a unit, a team, and they go out like relentlessly to accomplish the mission. Well, here on the Damon Friedman Show, we want to learn more about these leaders. And today I have an awesome friend. I'm just so honored that we are actually working together. And this dude, this guy, this leader is radically changing and transforming the world one individual at a time. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, everyone out there, please welcome Mr. Evan Owens from Reboot Recovery. God bless you in America.
Woo! Yeah, there should be like a giant crowd cheering. I don't think there is, but there could be. That'd be awesome.
There will be. Trust me, we're going to implement that from my producer.
Yeah, sound. Can we do a laugh track over the top and maybe some crowd cheer in the background when we dub this in? That'd be good.
It's done. It's done. We can hear it right now. Okay.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. Yes. So, hey, listen, brother, it's so great to, have you on the show. All the work that you're doing across the nation and around the world, man, I just been so impacted just by the work that you're doing, the lives that you're changing. I mean, Evan, listen, we have thousands of listeners right now, and they want to know more about who you are. Like, what exactly is it that you're doing? Because you're not just, an executive in the corporate arena. You're an executive in the nonprofit arena. You're an executive in the faith-based community. Like, you are a true leader of leaders. So Mr. Evan Owens, tell us a little bit about who you are, where you come from, and why you're in the grind today.
Man, yeah, that's good. Well, I think that a lot of times people they aim to become a leader of something specific, but for me, I think that my thing that's worked for me, at least, is always just following the thing I'm most passionate about and sticking with it long enough that eventually I just outlast other people and I become a leader in it. And ever since I was little, my family, I grew up in inner city Cincinnati, went to an inner city high school, and the whatever my hobby was at the time, a lot of parents, they'll say, you pick your sport and you're going to get expert coaching. That my parents were always so good about allowing me to, whatever the thing I was really into, they got all into with me. And that took me a while. I realized early on that I had a focus problem. But in doing so, I also developed a lot of different skills. And so I went to a kind of a special high school. It was an affirmative action high school. It was very unique, extremely diverse in inner city Cincinnati. My nickname was Cream or Twinkie or something to indicate that I was the white cream filling amongst all of the people of color that I was playing sports with. And I found a passion for music early on, so I decided that was going to be something that I invested in heavily. It ended up getting me a scholarship to go to Belmont University. I went to Belmont here in Nashville, where I met my amazing wife. Out of that experience, I thought I was going to become a songwriter, and so I started writing music in Nashville for a couple of years, and then that came to a screeching halt when I got fired from my publisher. They got bought by Sony ATV. And then, boom, I was out of a job. I needed to have a job. And so I went to go work for a commercial print company doing entry-level sales. My total take-home pay each for those 2 years, I think I want to say it was like $21,000 or $22,000 a year. My wife was in grad school. It's pretty lean. And so we got done with that. And my wife, she started working for Vanderbilt University in their traumatic brain injury programs that they had at Vanderbilt. It was called Pi Beta Phi, which is like the stroke rehab, brain rehab clinic that's part of Vanderbilt Medical. And lo and behold, even though she had forever had this dream of working with service members, one thing led to another, where the Army decided to sign a contract with Vanderbilt to handle all the overflow of military guys who had experienced traumatic brain injuries, send them to Vanderbilt. And that was really her first connection to military. Meanwhile, I had left my job selling printing and went to go work for a startup web development company. I love technology. I always have, and started doing entry-level sales for them, figured that out, got promoted to build a project management department, then got promoted to build a consulting department, then started managing all those departments. And then our CEO went to go start another company in California, and I took over as CEO of the business. And for the first time ever, had to lead something that I didn't start, which is a total unique challenge in and of itself. And so I was fortunate to lead that company. We were an Inc. 500 or Inc. 5000 company several years in a row. And I think we were the top 5 fastest growing companies in the state of Tennessee at one point. And learned a whole lot. And unfortunately, that did not end like I dreamed it would. We had there's a neat story I'll tell later if you want me to. But, I think for me, I knew that I was feeling called and led into doing this work with military community, with trauma. But yet, when you're catching so many fish and making great money and you have dual income and no kids, it doesn't make any sense to leave the safety. And so I stayed on the dock for a long, long, long time. And so I was there almost 12 years doing that. And so I can talk about kind of that transition. Yeah. But that's kind of what brought me to doing what I do now. And all of it was good. I mean, it was all really good and helped shape me. And yes, that's a little bit about me.
So no, I actually, we have a lot in common. I was born and raised in downtown LA in the melting pot. I lived, I went to school predominantly in with other minorities, particularly Black communities, all the way through. And it's funny because you said that even my, junior, senior year, I ran for a school called Wolfson High School, which, very diverse, predominantly Black. And I just remember I was on the 4x400 team. And every time I was not one of the fastest 400 meter runners. I had some pretty fast quarter speed, right? We actually had the fastest time that year in the 4x400. I ran 48 point. That's what I did, but I was not one of the fastest on the team. Yeah. In fact, I was one of the slowest. But they always had me as anchor, and they would call me Disco. They call me Disco, like I was like a spectacle or something. It's like, man, Disco's gonna be last leg, right? So it was, it was like, that's what I mean. But no, man, I've my diverse, my experience in diverse communities really helped me build to be the man that I am today, and so I can really appreciate that.
That's it.
I can also understand. When you're part of an organization or a company that you start and it's just kind of the grind, and then finally you get like this dream job, and then eventually that just doesn't work out and you're trying to figure out, what do I do next? Right. But then also what I really love about your story is a lot of people, you haven't even mentioned this. So you're married to an exceptionally brilliant young lady who's really like the core of your success. Yeah. I would say she's the better 9/10 of your life, which is fine.
Yeah, she's the cornerstone for sure. Her and Christ, equal. Yeah.
Yeah, dude, because she's a genius, man. And, but no, that's great. I know that there's no doubt. Now, you have found success because you've had a great partner and teammate and everything that you guys do together as a collective. So, no, man. So here you are, our listeners that are right now. I've got an amazing executive. This executive, is not just one in the corporate arena, in the nonprofit arena, in the faith-based arena. This guy is just a leader of leaders. And so here he is. He's on his journey, and now he's going through this transition. And please start sharing with the audience, like what happened, because you are the founder, the co-founder with you and your wife of the most successful, organization that I know of that deals with trauma in the way that you're doing this business. So please, how did it begin, in that transition into where, what you're doing today?
Yeah, I think of the story of, Peter, James, and John when they're fishing, right? The sons of Zebedee, they're out there fishing and they're not catching anything. And Jesus comes along and he says, "Hey, cast your nets to the side." And all of a sudden their boats are so full, they start to sink. And I can see them on the shoreline. And this is when he says, "Follow me and I'll make you fishers of men." And I think about that story. And I also think about that if I'm them, what I'm doing is I'm counting the fish, because I know each fish is worth $3 to me. And I say, man, with all these fish, I've just made the biggest financial gain in the history of my life. I'm seeing breakthrough in finances when it's been lean for a while. And on the day when I have the greatest financial success is the same day that Jesus comes to them and says, "Leave all that and come follow me." And I think about that story in my life. And that's what really had happened was, I never envisioned myself being a leader of an organization really growing up. I didn't think that was what I wanted to be. And more importantly, I never thought I would be financially successful. I think for me, it just sort of was like you have a job, you make enough money, you provide, and that's it, right? I mean, that was sort of the vision. And it's interesting because, and if I was going to make it big, I was going to do it through music. I wasn't going to do it through business anyway, right? So, I mean, that was the paradigm. And I knew that was a long shot. And so here I am. I finally have the dream career, right? My wife has a dream career. She had been recruited by the Department of Defense by this point to help build a traumatic brain injury clinic for service members at Fort Campbell, the first of its kind on the planet. And I'm the CEO of this company. I mean, these are high profile, major careers, making good money, all this kind of stuff. And then one day she said, "Hey, I'm inviting some former patients over for dinner. Can you pick up some drinks on the way home and come home early?" Okay, sure, I can do that. So I went, I got my Milo's sweet tea, picked that up. Shout out to Milo's right there. And went into the car, pulled into the driveway, saw a few cars already there because I was already late coming home from the office. Walked to the door. We sent the kids upstairs for babysitting, and we started having these conversations, just lighthearted, fun. But it quickly turned to conversations about trauma and the guilt, the regret, the shame, the grief, the identity crisis, all the things that really cling on to or hang on to that. And in this moment, I have to admit also, it started to bring up a lot of stuff in my life that I thought that I could be more successful than that I could. If I could just be successful enough, I could pretend it never was there. And at the same time, I was going through a bit of an identity crisis at work anyway. And so it was as if that night, as we started to have these serious conversations, it was almost like healing entered the room, sat down, took a seat, and joined us. Wow. And it was this beautiful time of healing. And I went to work the next day. And the way I talk about it a lot is I say that it felt like I was being asked to walk through life when I had just experienced the thrill of sprinting for the first time.
Wow.
And that feeling of sprinting. And I remember thinking, I don't want to walk through life anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. And from that moment on, it took 4 years for me to develop the courage. And the way I like to think of it is I was on the shore, the boat's where I wanted to be. And I was just trying my best to pull that boat all the way to the shore so I could, step from one thing to another seamlessly. And that sounds really good. That's a strategic plan, right? That's the way that business advisors told me to do it. But yet there's something that we also do, right? So if you jump too soon, this is called drowning because you missed the boat and you don't have the shore anymore. I didn't want to drown. But instead, what I did is I pulled it so long, you know what happened? Eventually, the boat just crashed into my dock. And it said, basically, I'm going to take the dock away. That way you have to get in the boat or you have to drown. Mm-hmm. And that's what really the Lord in his kindness did. We had a period in our business where we had our biggest growth ever. We had just hired a ton of people. And then we had 3 customers leave us over a period of about 5 weeks that represented nearly 60% of our profit.
Oh, my goodness.
And, we're facing layoffs. I'm facing a PR problem. People were saying things behind my back. I had employees who tried to get me tossed out as the CEO because I didn't have the majority ownership at the time. Lots of pain. And so it became really clear to me that, like, if I don't leave willingly, he's just going to force me out anyway. And so I did. So, I'd like to say it was this totally, Evan was just so holy and faithful, but I don't think that's really how most leaders end up in spots. I think sometimes you have a passion about something and God says, hey, I'm going to make this calling happen whether you want to or not. Right. And so, so that's what we did, man. We eventually quit our jobs in 2016, wrote our first Reboot Combat Recovery is what it was called back then. Our first military curriculum ever, wrote it in 2016, focused at that intersection where faith and trauma collide in the context of military. My dad's a Vietnam veteran, so I grew up around that as well. And man, it's just from that moment on, everything in our life has changed. And it's been the most unbelievable adventure, working side by side, day in and day out with my wife. And most marriages can't do that. Yeah, I know. But I know you and I have this in common. We work with the people that we love romantically and personally, which is unusual. And it is the best thing other than, getting married, getting saved, having babies. It's like number 4 on the list.
It's interesting because there's something that you shared earlier on the day that you're sitting there, you grab your Milo sweet tea, by the way, shout out to Milo sweet tea. Okay. They got it going on.
Yeah, so good.
All right. I need to be drinking some of that next time you come back on the podcast, but
no doubt.
But what you said about, send the kids upstairs, we're the babysitters, you're sitting down, you're listening and you're hearing, and all of a sudden you're hearing them process their trauma, their anger, their depression, their anxiety, their frustration, everything. And then all of a sudden you're doing the same thing. You're hearing it and you're like, something is happening. There's something going on. You yourself are processing your own trauma in the past, whatever it was. Right. And that really resonates with me because that's actually why I do what it is that I do in our nonprofit. every day that I'm helping out a warrior, every day that I help someone process trauma, I'm doing the same thing too, because I've got a lot of pain and hurt. I've got a lot of agony. I got a lot of disappointment. I got a lot of frustrations, and even with the Warrior's Journey, shout out to Mr. Kevin Weaver out there. We developed some products too with the Warrior's Challenge, but definitely, when
awesome.
you developed the Reboot Combat Trauma, right? That product there, that was superior in itself. There's nothing like that out there whatsoever. And so it's interesting because God has a plan. So for all of our listeners out there, here's Evan, who's the co-founder of, Reboot Recovery. And the reality is that he and his wife wrote this like instrumental product that's been helping out hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions of people, since the inception. So I know that you and your teammate Jennifer is just crushing it. You guys are doing incredible work. What are you guys doing today? Where is Reboot? How, last time I checked, you guys were in so many like different countries, not just within the nation, and you're just killing it. So what's Reboot Recovery doing right now? Tell us a little bit about the organization, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to dive in deep in a few minutes about, what our listeners, because everybody's here wanting to listen to you, Evan. You got leaders that are trying to figure out, how can I be a successful organizational leader just like, Evan? How can I, do this? So let's go ahead. So where's Reboot Recovery today? Tell us about the impact and what's going on.
Well, so I'll answer first by finding people who are ahead of you is the answer to that. But let me just say, even in our content, for 4.5 years, we led reboot groups before I ever remember me talking about Stand on the Shore. We led courses for almost 5 years, multiple times per week. So we were meeting literally with thousands of people per year, not paid, figuring out how to do it well. And so one of the resources we found during that time was written by Chris Ranella Adsett. It's called the Combat Trauma Healing Manual. And it is truly the thing that broke open this concept of faith and trauma. And without Chris, and now they're part of our Reboot team, we love them dearly. Be praying for Ranella. She is dealing with cancer and fighting a battle right now. But the point is that without their mentorship and guidance, Reboot would have never existed, and without their brainchild. Now, we did write our own stuff from that, obviously, but I'm saying that was the genesis of all of it. So I just want to make sure to give credit where credit is due, because they won't go seeking it. And so I wanted to give that to them. Where's Reboot today? Man, so we released the military curriculum. It did really well. It started in about 60 or 70 locations. Every group is the same, by the way. They're all 12 weeks long. They meet one night per week. They're led by everyday people. We believe in a bottom-up solution. We believe the person closest to the problem is best equipped to respond. In a world where right now there's already a national shortage of nearly 30,000 clinical professionals, and it's getting worse by the day, the only logical next step solution has to be peer-led support, because there simply aren't enough professionals. While I love my professional friends and I'm married to one, there ain't enough of them. And so we have to get back to things that worked in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s and well, which is neighbors sitting on porches, pastors sitting down with people, elders and deacons sitting down with people, friends getting together, family getting together, and doing at least that baseline of community counseling, that common sense work that we can do together. And so that's what we tapped into, and we gave everybody kind of a franchisable, almost proven model to be able to run a reboot course in their local context. And so released a military course. It grew very quickly. Released in 2018 after the Pulse nightclub shootings. We released a first responder program, which was down in Orlando, where that club was, and had a chance to work with a lot of the first responders from there. And that grew very rapidly. And then in 2020, I was sitting in a Mexican restaurant, which, if you know me, there's about an 80% chance I'm sitting in a Mexican restaurant.
Man, your infatuation with Mexican food is out of control, man. I mean,
dude, it's so freaking good. I don't know why all foods aren't Mexican. And also, it's funny because basically all Mexican food is kind of like Italian food that way. It's basically just the same food in different shapes or different types of shells. That's the thing I love about it. Like, the difference between spaghetti and some other pasta is just a different shape. Yeah. Anyway, I was sitting in the restaurant and I said, man, it frustrates me. This is in 2020, right as COVID was starting. And I said, it just frustrates me that we're always getting to the puck after it's already been hit someplace else. I was like, I feel like trauma sinks its teeth in, it starts doing its damage, and we're only brought in like 2.5 years after it's had a chance to blow things wide open in a person's life and wreck their whole world. I said, why don't we do a thing that's like a prevention program, and we'll call it Reboot Crisis Edition, what not to do when trauma hits your life. And we wrote it, filmed it, did our research, and through our research, we had identified 4 default responses to trauma that made things worse instead of better. And we released that. And that, man, it changed everything. That stupid, very poorly produced course was the first thing we ever had that went truly viral. I got to brief the White House and work with Health and Human Services, and it led to us getting a book deal to write a book called Healing What's Hidden that we're really proud of. And then that led to a tour with Brandon Lake, and that led to us starting Trauma Reboot, which is our trauma program for everybody, not just veterans and first responders. And today we've got almost 400 cities, 12 countries, 4 languages. This year, we've had over 5,000 people already graduate a course just this year alone, and we're up to 23 or 24,000 all time. Most of that has been in the last 2.5 years. So the last 2.5 years has been very intense. Yeah. And so that's where we're at today, man. Just trying to find people who want to be a part of the solution, who want to do more than play in a golf tournament and raise money. They want to help their neighbors, help their friends, help their family, and we want to equip them to do it.
So, okay, now you're big time, okay, because you're touring with some big names in the faith-based community. You're briefing in Washington, no big deal. You're just hanging out with the leadership, the executive leadership, while us little people are just watching you through the camera, right, on TV, on the tube. No big deal. Right.
Yeah, that's me. It's big time. I still fly Southwest. Don't get it twisted, for sure. Still take that that cheap fare.
So here we are, man. Right. So that's the reason why you're here. You're making an atomic impact. It's a global impact. I mean, some of the research that we've read actually that over a million people have been affected by your program. Over 1 million warriors. Over 1 million. First responders, over 1 million individuals across the nation that have dealt with some form of trauma that, Reboot Recovery has been instrumental in the healing process. And so, when you start thinking about it, you're making the kind of impact that most people are trying to figure out how to do. So here we are, man, which is the meat and potatoes. Everybody wants to know, okay, got it. All right, let's learn from this guy. So here we are, the first leadership trait that Evan wants to share with all of our listeners, and thousands of people are listening right now, right here, and they want to hear what Evan is saying, as in what is the most important leadership trait, a characteristic, something that you feel is very, very valuable that you want to press upon other people. So here it is, Mr. Evan. What is it? What do we want to share with our audience?
Yeah, I think it's Reagan that said, there's no limit to what we can accomplish if we don't care about who gets the credit. And I think that the secret sauce to Reboot has always been that Jenny and I have run from celebrity Christian culture. Not that we judge it. We don't think it's bad, but Jenny and I very much, for the first, 11 years of this, we were invisible. I mean, it really wasn't until the past 2 years really where we started doing podcasts when the book came out, and even started speaking on stages or doing speaking events. And it was really because we wanted, when a person came into a Reboot course, we wanted that local leader to be Reboot. Whoever that local leader was, they were, as far as that participant knew, they were the founders. It didn't matter. And I remember even a few years ago, I could go to any Reboot group in the country, sit in it, and nobody knew who I was. So I'd ask, what do you think of this group? How's it going? And they would just tell me honestly, that guy on the videos is a loser, whatever it is. They would just tell me. And it was really cool. So I'd say the first thing is, being authentic and staying true to who you really are. I think there's so much allure, especially in the world of platform building. There's such a temptation to want to become a celebrity, and everybody is a celebrity nowadays. Everybody wants to have a following, everybody wants to be an influencer. And I just am not impressed by influencers. I'm impressed by builders, people that actually build things, that build companies, that build movements, that build brands, that build people. And so that's what I would say is be authentic and focus on building, not influencing. Not that there's anything wrong with influencing, but if you ask what my secret sauce has been, it's been not worrying too much about the credit and focusing a whole lot on what truly do I want, which is I want to build something that outlasts me. I want to build a movement that when I'm dead and gone, it still exists. And I think that's what we're on our way to building, is a viral movement that multiplies itself, that I don't have to continually feed. And if I die, it doesn't disappear with me because it was all about me.
I think,
and that's a massive temptation. It's hard to fight that if you're in business or an entrepreneur.
So
endeavor.
I think what you just said was very profound. I've heard this before. So you said a couple statements, and these takeaways our listeners have to have. Bottom line, right? You talked about authentic leadership. And I think really when you said, we're going to be able to accomplish a lot as long as it doesn't matter who gets the credit. And I'm talking about, man, that takes a high level of humility, because everybody always wants to have the credit, whether it's a little or a lot. That I've heard before, and I'm passionate about that. Who cares who gets the credit? I just want to win. But what you just said that I've never heard before, never on this podcast or even throughout my leadership development throughout my life. And I've had some great mentors. I've been in some great courses. Man, when you said, oh, everybody wants to be an influencer, but not everybody wants to be a builder. Don't just be an influencer. Be a builder. No, but that's true. It's kind of like these people that just love to talk. Right? I mean, there are things that are happening in the world that are noble causes, especially with professional athletes, right? People that are Hollywood actors. They love to talk. They love to say something. Like pipe up, nobody does anything. Are you building anything? I hate it when people of influence start talking but never do anything about it, especially when things are sensitive within our country right now. There's a lot of things are very sensitive. And so that's what you're doing right now. I hate to say it, but you are.
Yeah. And how often, like, I'll give you an example. When we wrote our book, I remember we pitched some publishers and had some offers, and they asked me lots of questions. And I would say 80% of most of the publishers' questions to me were about my platform, how big, who's on it, how influential am I? Never once did they ask me about my actual outcomes on if my system had actually helped people. They never once asked me about my faith and how healthy I was, or about my marriage, if I was a good father. So my point is, my character really didn't factor in. And this has to terrify us, that we're reading books and we're listening to podcasts and we're attending conferences with people up on the stage who they might have lots of charisma and they might have a lot of talent, but they don't have any character that's shows that they're actually a person of humility, a person that is worthy of us following. And I think when our core skill, this is what I always look for. I'm looking to follow leaders who are builders and who have a core competency that's not just promoting themselves. Because that's what we exist in business right now. There's a ton of people who are great, and they're really what they're best at is just promoting themselves. They're not really best at anything specifically. So when they write a book, I'm kind of like, you've been thinking about the subject for like 10 minutes and nobody has actually been helped by it, but you're suddenly an expert on it because you want to sell a book. And that's where I'm a little bit like, well, let me check the references. Let me check the references. And that's something that I encourage people to do with anybody they're listening to or following. Like, check the references.
No, it definitely. I think one of the challenges that I had in academia is that particularly, and I'm not going to get into any specifics because I don't want to get into trouble, but I find it very interesting that you can have a student that ends up being a professional, college student. They get their bachelor's degree, they get their master's, they get their PhD in leadership. And now all of a sudden, now that they've got their PhD, they become professors and they're teaching on leaders, not like they're teaching other leaders on leadership.
Right. And you're like, what have you led?
Oh, well, I'm leading the classroom. I'm like, hold on a second. You mean you got sanctioned because you got a piece of paper? Now listen, for all of you out there, okay, I'm not saying that you're not a good leader. I'm not, but I'm just trying to tell you that just because you got a certificate, it doesn't make you a leader. This was a point of contention when I was getting my doctorate at work. And I was just like, really? I'm in a class on leadership, and yet the people who are teaching me has never led anything except in academia after they graduated and got their PhD. Are you kidding me? So, I mean, no, it's true. You got to check the references. You got to check the credibility. And I love what you're saying. And I think authenticity is very, very important. And it's exactly what you're doing right now here on this podcast. So, here you are, Evan, for all of our listeners just jumping on right now. He is part of a global movement right now, handling trauma in multiple communities, not just in the veteran community, not just in the first responder community. We're talking about trauma is a universal issue, and Reboot Recovery is crushing it. So I want to ask, Evan, right now, you've had a long journey. You are where you are today. You are nationally and globally recognized, hands down. You no longer are invisible. You can walk into a room and people are going to know who you are. That's just a fact. You can't avoid that anymore. Why? Because your products and your services are absolutely the best. They're exceptional. But my question is, because I know you work around the clock and you get exhausted. And just like me, you get frustrated and you get angry. And you sometimes, you and I are so similar. It's crazy. It's so crazy, right? We're not just people that encourage other people to change the world for good. We are in the trenches, and it's hard. It is exhausting. So I want to ask you, man, right? Listeners are out there. They want to know, what is your driving ideology? What keeps you driving hard? Because I've seen you, man. You are relentless, man. And you literally multiple times I've seen you just traveling at Mach 1 on fumes, baby. On fumes. So what is it? What is your secret sauce? What is your driving ideology? Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, I watch these dudes, these influencers on social media, and I can't stand it when they're like, all right, 3:15, I wake up, cold plunge. Then I do 6 minutes of Mind Palace with my wife. Then I do, it's like, and by 7 a.m., I already finished my whole day. I'm already working in 3 days more than you have. That is, I work hard, and I always laugh at these people. Like, I'm going to start making up a video that's like, I don't sleep for 6 days in a row. I just work straight. I'm burying you guys with productivity. I would say with So my ideology is twofold. One, it starts with the end in mind. I mentioned that earlier. I want to build something that outlasts me. I don't necessarily view retirement as a goal. I'm not excited about retiring. I'm not excited to someday, if I retire, it'll be because I'm forced into it by age or health. So I think for me, they say there's people that live to work and there's people who work to live. I believe God created me to work. I believe that's one of the things that he makes us able to do. I don't think he made us just to have hobbies and kind of waste our time, right? Not that hobbies are a waste of time. That came out wrong, but you know what I mean? So I would say the first one is I'm trying to build something that outlasts me. The other thing is I think, and I truly do believe this, as a person of Christian faith, not, the majority of the people that we reach are not people who agree with my worldview. I just want that to be known. And so I look around and I see church buildings full of people that don't really know the true people sitting next to them. They don't really know what's going on in their life. They are kind of plastic. They come, they smile, they go home. And I see this and I think about the reality that there are 1 in 3 kids under the age of 18 who already has a diagnosed mental health condition. So the greatest opportunity for the church to be relevant in our time and day is to have something to say about this intersection where trauma and faith collide. And they always collide because I don't care if you're talking to an atheist. When trauma hits their life, they're going to say, why did this happen? That is an existential spiritual question. And so my ideology is I believe we have a window of time where as people of faith, we can truly help the most people, and we could truly have, you might think of it as evangelical or whatever you want to call it, but we have a window of time where we could reach the most people in their moment of crisis and literally save thousands upon thousands of lives. And I think for me, that's very urgent. And so I take it very seriously, the urgency of that. And that's why I a lot of times will say yes to things that I probably health-wise should say no to, because I do sense the urgency behind
I'm going to tell you right now.
And I'm not always the best at that, man. I'm not always the best at setting my boundaries, and it's something I'm working on.
Definitely. It's interesting because one of the things that I've had to learn is to find time and space to rest. Because, man, I'm going to tell you right now, like I burn everybody out around me, and I'm not the best leader because I'm not rested. You and I are very, very similar. I mean, it's crazy. A lot of the things that you share, you say it, I think it, and then I say it privately, right? Here on my team. You said a couple things that I have to emphasize. And before I begin, for all my listeners out there, obviously, Evan is a person of faith. And the reality is that his product and his service is not just geared toward people of faith. No, absolutely not. I believe down the core of my soul, humans are made of mind, body, and soul. And so his Reboot Recovery is trying to address these issues. He said it best. There's existentialistic crisis. There's a mental health crisis going on. There's this, where, you mentioned where faith and trauma collide. Is that what you said exactly? Right. And so that's the space that he's in. And there's such a shortage. I remember when I was an inpatient for 3 months recovering from my own injuries, particularly because of mild traumatic brain injury, it was easy to start cognitive processing therapy. Not a big fan of it. I believe that there's a hybrid that's a lot more effective. It was hard for me to continue to dig all this stuff up, get it to surface and talk about it a million times.
Over and over again.
But let me tell you what happened. All of a sudden in my session, I'm having this question. I'm like, I need to understand, like, okay, I got the psychological concepts. I understand the treatment here, but I'm having this problem and I'm asking a question like, God, why did you allow this to happen? And,
Right.
In the secular,
Right.
in the VA, right. They recognize humans of
Right.
mind, body, and soul. But the reality is that
Right.
when I sought out any type of spiritual care, it lacked. It just did. In fact, even when I was talking to my psychologist, the best psychologist I ever had, could not really address the existentialistic crisis of why is God allowing these things to happen? It was almost like brushing over. So Reboot Recovery, the product that Evan and Jen, made, being influenced by Chris, by no doubt, is an incredible, leader within this industry. There's this mental health crisis, and they're figuring out a way where they can fill this gap. And so Reboot Recovery is doing that.
Right.
So you mentioned that legacy is important to you. So here you are, and this is your opportunity to make a dent in the suicide epidemic. Suicide is not just an issue within the veteran or first responder community. It's an epidemic in America, within the adolescents, within adult communities and everybody else out there. I don't know if you have a Reboot Recovery for adolescents, but you probably need to start working on that now, because it's the second or third leading cause of death right now in America for ages, I think last time I checked in the CDC, 11 to 33 or something like that.
Yeah, it's second
and
for
so,
teens.
And so the bottom line is that, Reboot Recovery serves everyone. And I love what he's saying. Establish a legacy. I'm going to say one last thing and I'm going to give you back the mic. And that is this, is that for me, I have the same passion as Evan. He, when I'm dead and gone, I want to be known as a person that led a movement to help individuals that were dealing with trauma heal. He's doing it his way. It's atomic.
Right.
I'm doing it my way. It's nuclear. And together we're working as a collective, because humans are made of mind, body, and soul. We believe that if you want to have that healing, you've got to address the soul. And he's doing that. Particularly, it's that psychological component meeting the spiritual piece. And I love it. So I love what you're talking about with leaving a legacy. So here you are, you're running a global movement, Evan, a global movement. And people want to know, I mean, you got a lot of people that work for you. You got a lot of people that work with you. I mean, there's a ton, not just on your staff, but particularly your volunteer force. It is completely crazy how many volunteers you have. So what's the secret, man? So here's this third component of the podcast. And that is organizationally speaking, what's your secret sauce, baby? What do you want to tell other leaders? Look, man, you want to have a global movement. You want to have, thousands of people that have volunteered in the organization to lead groups around the world. What is it? Talk to us, Evan, because I need to know myself, dude, because I'm still trying to master that. So please let me glean from you, man.
It's easy. Meth. No, I'm just kidding with you. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, that's it all the time. You never sleep, man. I've been awake for 12 days straight. I'm getting a lot done. No, I'm kidding with you guys. That's terrible.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, just something you were talking about real quick. I want to go back to, and then I'll answer your question. The mind, body, and soul thing. It's funny because you go to any person, you say, can trauma wound your mind? They go, yeah, of course. You say, can trauma wound your body? Like, yeah, of course. You're like, do you believe you're made of mind, body, and soul? And they're like, yeah. You're like, so then can trauma wound your soul? And they're like, I don't know. Never thought of that before. And that's the opening conversation that really starts every reboot program ever, is if it's true, your mind, body, and soul, then can all three parts be wounded? And then how would we go about healing all three parts? Whether you're a person of Christian faith, Muslim faith, Buddhist faith, Taoist faith, no faith, it doesn't really matter. You're going to get a lot out of our reboot programs because you're going to at least be able to agree with the premise that we all have a soul that can be wounded, and that soul needs healing.
So good.
And I believe that souls need soul healers, right? And so I think that I'm asked a lot of times what are, people call it like the flywheel effect. How does an organization become self-multiplying? And I always laugh when leaders say things like, oh, and just accidentally, this just kind of happened, because it's like, yeah, it happened by chance, but that's because we were swinging, 50,000 pitches a day every day for a decade, figuring out how to perfect that swing. And then magically one day it happened. So I think that for us, from the beginning, a couple of things that we learned. So those of you who are listening who don't know this, I'm a civilian, right? I never served in the military. And so you have to be pretty crazy to be a person who's a civilian, to go to the PX during lunchtime on an active duty during a war where everybody's combat patched up, right? I mean, everybody's got tabbed out, kind of thing. You have to be pretty crazy to be a civilian, to walk onto a military base during lunch at the PX and just start walking with people and saying, would you like to talk about faith, and trauma. Would you like to talk about combat experience? This is a very unwelcoming audience. Let's just leave it at that, to civilians, right? If you're walking into this room, they're going to say, what do you know about it? Have you deployed? And you're going to be like, no. And I'm like, well, then how can you talk about it? And you're going to be like, I can't. That's why I want to ask you questions about it. It's very, very hard. So my point is, early on, I realized that if Reboot was to be successful, it had to be about more than me. And so therefore, what I did was I found and identified people who had the greatest influence, which were the people closest to the problem. So they had the greatest influence because they were a trusted entity by the people in their unit. And so I realized there was this micro influence that we live in an age where more and more people are more likely to now crowdsource whether or not a certain treatment is right for them than they are to trust the advice of their medical professional. So if that's true, then this means that this person who's seemingly untrained has more influence than the person with 3 degrees. Let that sink in a minute. A person who literally spent no time on the subject. And you see this all the time on social media. Think about what's just happened with a lot of the COVID stuff, whatever. Every person had an opinion. Even if they had no medical training, people were like, oh, that's a really good opinion. We should follow this person, right? And I'm not pro or con masks. I'm not getting into that crap. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying people have a tremendous influence now who really have no expertise. But what they do have is trust of people around them. And so early on, I realized if I could mobilize these micro influencers to be influencers of change at a very grassroots level and say each person is going to reach 5 to 10 people, this is like Pyramid Scheme 101. But I realized these E3, E4, E5, E6 service members had the power to reach other 5 dudes that were in their, barracks room, they played video games with them. They, went to the bar together, whatever it was. I realized that it didn't take very many of these micro influencers for us to start having 50, 60, 70 people coming to Reboot every single week. And once we hit that stride, it was crazy because all of a sudden they'd walk into a group and they'd see me stand up and they'd instantly start rolling their eyes. And then their buddy who invited him would be like, no, listen up. This dude has something legit to say. And all of a sudden, you know what I had? Instant credibility because trust is contagious. Trust is contagious. And so if they trusted me, then the person they brought with them trusted me because it's transferable. Trust is transferable. And that's really how we've worked to this day. We've relied on that local leader to transfer their trust in me to other people. And the average group only serves 15 to 20 people a year. But you multiply that times 400, that's a heck of a lot of people per year. And so, that's the secret sauce is taking time to build trust and then also constantly doing things that are way outside of your comfort zone. And I'd say, you said I was tired a lot. Honestly, that's the work is not what tires me. It's the living constantly outside of my comfort zone that's tiring. I just get, that's the part
So I'm going to just tell
down.
You right now on national radio here, the bottom line is that you're one of the most credible people that deals with trauma, bottom line. And you mentioned earlier on, for everyone who's in the audience out there, Evan, he just shared, he's heavily involved in helping warriors deal with their trauma from combat, and yet he's never served in the military. His father served in the military; he was in Vietnam. But the bottom line is I'm here to tell you, everybody. I'm going to say this right now. Mike's going to drop. I'd walk into the room if I had to pick one dude to walk into this room to be able to address trauma. I would walk in with Evan 1,000%. I'm here to tell you that that's the bottom line truth. He says mobilizing micro influencers to garner trust. Well, I'm telling you right now, he's mobilized. I'm hoping a macro influencer because he's already gained our trust, not through his military experience because he doesn't have any. It's his experience addressing and helping heal trauma. Bottom line. And so but you're speaking to all sorts of other people that want to help communities that they're not intimately familiar with or served in. So this is powerful. So everybody who's listening right now, here's Evan saying, look, hey, this is the secret sauce is mobilizing micro influencers to garner trust. So he gleaned from these influencers. Go ahead.
People all the time say, like, I've heard people looking for a church and they're like, where do I fit in? Right? Where do I fit in, like, this church or this civic club or this company? And it's like that old cliche, but I just feel like that's never been the question that Jen and I asked. We never picked our church. We never picked our work. We never picked anything based on where we fit in. We actually went to where we were most needed. And I would say that is fundamentally always usually not going to be where you feel most comfortable. It would have been far more comfortable for me to build a reboot program for entrepreneurs who are running companies. I knew what that felt like. I know what the trauma of being betrayed by other owners in your company. I know what it feels like to be badmouthed from the press. I know what it feels like to have employees who you think are one thing and then behind your back they're going to, I know what those traumas feel like, those wounds. I know what it feels like to lose a giant client for no other. I know what those things feel like. I could have talked about that all day long, but instead I find myself surrounded by dudes in a uniform who couldn't care what I have to say less. And I think that deep into the pool where your feet aren't touching, there's something so intimate about that, where people realize, like, the reason they trusted you, because they're basically like, Evan, you are crazy to be here. You have to be here for no other reason than that you care about us, because it's not like the beatings that you're taking are so terrible that anybody else would have given up, but you're still here. And I think in just doing that builds something that's so credible. So if you're leading a company, do that same thing. Constantly find ways to get outside of your comfort zone and do things, because you're used to being the one in the room who has all the answers. So go find a room where you have none of the answers, and pretty soon you'll be feeling like your employees feel when they come to your company for the first three months, 90 days, whatever it is. Like, stretch those boundaries constantly. And Damon, you do this physically. You're constantly pushing your body to do new things, and I do it experientially. So it's just it's that desire to ever be finding something that's not comfortable.
I just think that's something that people lack, and that's the discipline and the strength and the courage to work outside their comfort zone. And that's the reality. And right. I'm embracing that big time. And for everybody out there, what he's just shared, if you want to mobilize a people group so that they can empower other people, you got to mobilize micro-influencers to garner their trust. He's gained their trust, and now he's able to walk into a room, and all of a sudden that credibility is there, and then all of a sudden the influence is there, and then all of a sudden the mission is being accomplished. This is the secret sauce to his volunteer force. I mean, thousands upon thousands of people. This crazy that they're doing this for free. Why? Because they trust Evan, they trust the program, they trust the process, and they know that it's going to actually meet the objective. They're going to get what they need, and that's the healing process. So, perfect segue with this. This is the last component of the podcast, trying to figure out how can we leaders be empowered so that we can ignite a movement, so that we ourselves can be world changers. So the last part is the strategic connection, strategic output. Like, how do you connect with your audience? These are people that you're trying to help, right? So you're talking about that, those warriors that are going to come to the group. You're talking about the people who are going to be channeling in to hear one more reboot Zoom, or to go into a group, regardless of what that people group is. Tell us the secret on what you do, because I have an idea, because you love marketing, man. You know the razzle dazzle, baby.
Yeah.
All right. You know all that beautiful stuff. I'm learning all the time from you, man. I'm making phone calls. I'm like, all right, how do I connect with people on my website? Like, listen, I'm not kidding. He's worth some big money,
ridiculous.
baby. All right. So how do you connect with people? And you only get one option here. Only one shot. Go ahead, brother. Go.
So you're asking, how do I stay connected? How do I communicate? Right. That's what the question is. Make sure I follow. Yeah. So, so let me tell you, the benefit of having these volunteers is that they spread your work very quickly. The challenge of it is that, and it's by design, the graduate, you know who they're loyal to? They're loyal to whoever led their group and where their group is hosted. So let me give you a classic example. Group meets at a nonprofit in Pensacola, Florida. I'm just making up a city because I want to be careful. They use our curriculum. Their staff uses our curriculum. They get all our coaching. We help them with their outreach. 12 people graduate from that program. Who are they going to say changed their life? They're going to say that nonprofit is who changed their life. They don't care about Reboot. They don't even know who Reboot is. They think that I work for that organization. And so this is one of the dangers. And this is where I say I have to not care who gets the credit, because if I did, I'd be territorial, and I'd be worried about all these things that keep a movement, right? That the movements die when they start becoming organizations. Movements die when you start trying to organize a movement, an SOP, standard operate procedure, a movement, it starts becoming an organization, and organizations by nature are organizations, not movements. And so for us, we have to allow movements, they make up their own rules as they go, because it's the people at the local ground level who are informing the movement how it needs to adapt in order to thrive and survive in that community. It's a living organism that way. Organizations don't do that. Organizations dictate to the local elite people what's going to happen.
Yeah.
See the difference? And so for us, how do we communicate with people? Actually, it's less about us talking. It's a lot more about us listening and learning. And most of the changes that we're making, like we're rolling out a new curriculum right now, most of those changes are things that people from those groups have told us needs to happen to the curriculum for it to continue thriving at a very local, niche, micro level. And so that's what we're doing. So most of our communication actually is listening more than it is dictating down. And then the second thing, what we do is we try to group our communications together in really meaningful, longer form, 20, 30, 40-minute chunks where we say, hey, here's everything you need to know in a single conversation. People are busy. I try to be really respectful of our leaders and our volunteers' time and our graduates' time. So but the first one's the big one is, movements die when they become organizations. And there's a great thought leader on movements. His name's Eric Fish. He's an old friend of mine. And we talk about this all the time, that the temptation for any rapidly growing movement is for it to become too organized. It's like the hip hop rapper that gets too cultured and all of a sudden their hip hop doesn't work anymore because they get disconnected from the people they serve. And that's a risk for any movement.
Man, I'm going to tell you, so I'm writing all this stuff down because I'm stealing it and I'm going to write a new book and I'm going to get all the credit. I'm just kidding.
Nice. Hey, that's fine, man. That's fine. Just give me a byline on the back.
It's like, this isn't your first rodeo. This happens plenty of times, man. I know people love to rip off your stuff. I'm not kidding. I mean, and you know it and I know it.
Yeah, that is true. And that's okay. I rip off other people's stuff. I try to give them credit though.
You give people credit where credit's due. So this last point is very, very important. And it was absolutely loaded. I had to write down, it's like, when it focus on the communication, but when it's communication, he's saying, listen to the ground level, the troops on the ground on what they're doing.
Right. They know more than you do.
And I love what you're saying, right? Allow the movement to grow organically. And movements only die when they get too organized. This is really resonating with me. I wrote a book on it. I studied and researched hundreds of movements, and I'm trying to make sure that my movement doesn't die through being overly organized, right? And so here you are, and you're exploding. And I'm here to tell you, everybody, listen to what Mr. Evan Owens is. At SOF Missions, we have our foundational training called the Be Resilient program. It's turned into education and training, and now it's a university. So I would like to kind of announce today Professor Evan Owens, who is getting an honorary doctorate at the Be Resilient University. Let me tell you,
dude, I love it, man. I'm gonna put that on my resume.
That's right, Dr. Owens right here. And let me tell you why. I know I'm saying this kind of, making a joke, but in reality, I'm not. I'm being very, very serious. Evan Owens knows more about trauma and recovery than 99.9% of people. And that's just a fact. So here we are, as we're wrapping everything up, right? Here we are, we're listening to one of the global leaders in this incredible movement that's actually started organically. He's saying, man, if you're a leader, you day one, you got to make sure that you're not worried about who gets the credit. That's hands down. Authentic leadership, just be who you are, because people need to know that you're authentic, that you're real, you're transparent, and you are. I'm telling you that's a fact. Number two, all right, what drives him? He wants to establish a legacy. He does, but in this legacy, when he's dead and gone, he wants to make sure that this movement that's been ignited, it's more than just about him. It's about him making an atomic impact. And that at the end of the day, that he addressed something that was so critical happening in our nation. There's a mental crisis going on nationally and globally. And Reboot Recovery is just crushing it, addressing these issues and solving problems. And then what do? He goes, hey, listen, you want to know a little bit about, my secret sauce? He said this is like mobilize micro influencers to garner trust, right? This is what he did. And that's what he did. He grabbed all these individuals, right? He taught them, he educated, he empowered them. They were micro influencers that became like incredible influencers throughout the nation, throughout the world, right? And then lastly, he's saying, man, listen, at the end of the day, here's some food for thought. Work outside of your comfort zone. And when it's time to really connect, communicate with your people, focus on listening, and let the grassroots grow, because the people on the ground know a whole lot more than you do. And by the way, right, when you ignite a movement, don't overly organize it because it's going to die. So listen, Evan, we only have a few more minutes, and I just want to give you the last minute to talk to my audience because here's the deal. This has been loaded. I'm going to let you say, what are your parting shots? What are the last couple of things that you want to share, with our audience? They're infatuated by you. They're trying to be like you. They want a movement like you. What's the last thing? Go ahead. Anything that's on your heart, whatever it is, you go before we wrap this up. Go ahead, Evan.
Yeah, I guess my first thing would be don't follow me. I'll lead you off a cliff accidentally. I'm not the answer. So, my faith dictates who the answer is. It's not me. I would say number 2, though, is find the thing that I call the sweet spot of the bat. When you've been hitting baseballs and you can connect with them, but every now and then you swing and you feel it ring in your hands. Golf shots are similar. You connect and it's going to be a big hit. You just know. I mean, you can feel it ringing, and it's the sweet spot of the bat, right? It's the sweet spot of the club, wherever it is. And I think that find that thing that causes the alarm bells of your heart to go off, that when you do, you feel like you're hitting the sweet spot of the bat. You find that, money, everything else won't matter. Everything else will take care of itself. Will it be your most lucrative option? Probably not. Will it be the one that is the safest and the most secure? Probably not. Will it be the one that has the best benefits? Maybe not. Will it be the one that, I don't know. I don't know any of those things. But what I do know is that you won't work a day in your life. And number 2 is that you will find something that everybody else wants.
Man, I love that. That really resonates with me because, you said it best. If you find something that you're passionate about, the sweet spot, right? I like to say it's what keeps me up at night. It's not work, and everything else comes together. You're not working. You're just living out your ultimate, calling in life, and that's what you're doing.
That's right.
Man, Evan, thank you so much for being on the Damon Friedman Show.
You, Damon.
How can
Appreciate
people?
You.
Now, you just wrote a book. This book is awesome. I wish I had it here. I'm going to make sure our producers and directors that we're going to have it here. There's going to be some B-roll on it. Everyone's going to see it. How can we get a book? How can everybody in the audience out there be more like Evan? Even though they say, "Don't be like me." All right, got it. But we want to do what Evan does. But let's learn more about your book. What is it? And where can we buy it?
I mean, to buy the book, rebootrecovery.com is our site. If they want to buy the book, they go to Amazon. It's called Healing What's Hidden, and it's probably the thing I'm most proud of. A lot of good nuggets in there. I can't wait for more and more people to read it. Healing What's Hidden, rebootrecovery.com, or find us on any social media at rebootrecovery.com.
Awesome. Rebootrecovery.com. Evan, he's not just a nonprofit leader. He's actually a phenomenal speaker. He really is. I heard him speak just over a month ago. Amazing. He's also an incredible musician. He played the guitar. I'm like, seriously, is there anything that Evan can't do? Right? He's a marketing genius.
That's the definition of an amazing musician. You play the guitar.
You sang and you played the guitar. I was like, what? Were you on the worship team back in the day? You probably were. And then he's also an accomplished author. Evan, thank you so much for being on the show, man. We love you so much. Thank you for making such an incredible impact. I appreciate you being on the show.
This is awesome. What a great show.
And everybody out there, this is Damon Friedman on the Damon Friedman Show. Evan, we're grateful for you. May all of you have hope. And if you're struggling with trauma, get a hold of rebootrecovery.com. Evan's got the answer. And for all of you out there, we appreciate you listening. May the commander of the universe be with you, and Godspeed.